Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. Council, thank you for getting here, most of us on time. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and follow that by a moment of silence. Okay, I think our first discussion is going to be of the local rules for our meetings going forward. I'll open up the floor for discussion.
Mayor, I'll kick things off just briefly. Okay. Council, in your packets, we included a red line just for consideration, just kind of more or less as a starting point. If council's good with those, then this is a quick conversation. If there's other changes, Casey's going to note those, and we can work to pull that together and get you another draft copy. So outside of that, that's the staff input for this. So it's up to you guys. State law does allow council to adopt local rules on how you govern your meetings and run your meetings and things like that, and that's what this is. So with that, I'll turn it over to council for input. And
yeah, I think that the reason that this was brought up was as an opportunity to talk about ways of being more transparent and having better communication during council meetings, and being more specific about public input to when we could hear that from them, specifically when we're voting for something. Is that pretty much what is that what you guys remember of the conversation at the workshop? Mm-hmm. So putting the public comments at the end served the purpose of what we said was that we would have public comments during the unfinished business
and new business. Yes, ma'am.
That were specific to whatever those topics were, so that if we're voting on something, we get to hear from residents and from the community what their specific thoughts are on that specific subject before we vote on it at that time. And then the public comments would be at the end of anything that was unrelated to that. And all that makes sense to me, except for when I get to the part that public comments are not automatically included with the new, with unfinished business and new business, unless I'm reading that wrong.
So there's a couple ways we can handle that. One is just in generalities and an understanding amongst council that after you've got your motion and your second and council has had their discussion, then the mayor would just call for public comments, which is how we did it, I'm going to say back during former Mayor Rundy's days, maybe a little bit beyond that. They used to call for the public comments on each of the agenda items. We can also just put a brief, small little statement on the agenda before unfinished business to alert the public that council will entertain public comments, 1 minute, that kind of thing. So we could add it to the agenda as well. We can get specific in the local rules and have it there. So I think you got a number of options on how we can do it. It's just a matter of how council wants to see it done.
Yeah, I just wanted it to be something that was there at all times, not at the discretion or at the way that it's written right now. Is should the mayor call for it, which opens it up to a kind of as objective. Okay. Should it be called? I would like to see it as it's just there as an option. Okay. And then the other question I had was how much time they would have.
In the past, we've done 1 minute. Casey, I believe that's pretty consistent with others. Yeah. So in your general public comments would be the normal 3 minutes. On the agenda items, it would be 1 minute.
Is there a thought behind why it's 1 minute when it's during a vote? Because that, to me, that would be the time that someone would have more to say that was impactful to that conversation.
Honestly, no rhyme or reason to it, to be honest with you,
I think
other
it
than
would-
just to
could be
move the
whatever
meeting
we
along.
want, right?
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
but it
Yeah.
seemed like that 1 minute conversation came up, if I recall, in the interest of time and moving things forward.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's not we didn't envision that as a sign-up type thing. It would just be
Right.
walk up to the podium. So you could have one person, you could have 20 people. Yeah, and it was just really in the interest of time and the rest of the meeting, and so that council could get through the rest of the business meeting. But if council wants it to be 2 minutes, then, that's how we'll put it.
What's that, Tom?
What's everybody think, minute-wise?
Well, I've been to several other city council meetings in several other cities throughout North South Carolina. Generally, they're keeping it to 1 minute. Because when the folks are getting up to speak at those 1 minute after the items, they already have their speech prepared for 1 minute. And once folks get the hang of it and they're going with it, it seemed to speed things up as far as, everyone being able to express their opinion.
Yeah.
Because if we, when we talk about the deer, when we talk about pickleball zoning, we're going to have a lot of folks that want to that want to speak because everybody needs to be heard. But at 3 minutes, I was Concord. They're at 5 minutes, and they were in session. I had to go. They were in session till about 3 a.m. in the morning, and
So
they
here's
made for a lengthy meeting.
So procedural question, if I may. Sure. So let's say if we agree that a minute is acceptable for a line item, for an agenda item, and 3 minutes is acceptable for general public comments. If a resident or someone has a contribution to an agenda item that takes a minute, but it's a really good point and we want to hear more about that, can we still have the discretion without violating any Robert's rules to say, hey, tell us more about that, or let's have a discussion about that, and that turns into 5 minutes? Is there any issue
I
with
mean,
that?
when it gets to those types of public comments, I mean, the biggest key is to be consistent, right? So if you're going to do a minute, and to use your example, so council, if it's okay, I'd like to hear some more on that particular piece. And council's, yeah, okay, great. Then that's y'all's discretion. But consistency is really the key,
Okay.
in how you
That might
handle
come
it.
into
So.
play if the topic isn't it's something that more people want to talk about, but we've already heard enough. You give one person an extra time, then people feel like you didn't give their topic extra time.
So if we stuck to the 1 minute and council exercised judgment on maybe asking questions of that speaker, would that be appropriate if we wanted to do that? Instead of just,
Yeah, I mean,
just a blanket.
So the way we envisioned it, and maybe this will help some, is if somebody, for whatever reason, they didn't go online the Wednesday before the meeting and look at the packet and send out questions to council. Hey, I don't understand this or that or the other thing. And the first time they're hearing about it is when it gets presented. And let's say it's something with the zoning code, right? Nick gets up to the podium and he presents, here's what's in there, this, that, and the other thing. Council has their discussion, and then mayor opens it up for public comments. Somebody wants to get up and say, hey, I don't understand this piece. Can you explain this further? Then Nick could come back up to the podium, or whoever the council person is, yes, here's the answer to your question. If they want to get up and say, well, I just think that's dumb and y'all shouldn't do that. Okay, thank you for your comments, and you can sit down. So that was kind of the intent, was to open the floor for the public to be able to ask questions pertinent to that specific item. I don't know that you need more than a minute, versus
You're probably right.
I want to get up and give a diatribe on all my feelings about this particular item.
But it might be that.
But-
That's the thing, is that we're moving public comments that have nothing to do with the unfinished or new business to the end. And we're taking away 2 minutes of a person's opportunity to speak to the agenda items that are in new business and unfinished business. So to me, you are taking some time away from someone to be able to have full explanation of why they feel a certain way. I mean, again, we're going to talk about deer all night long, but with the deer, every person that's spoken about the deer has had their 3 minutes, right? When we were talking about Marina Drive and the hotel, everyone that spoke had 3 minutes because it was a pertinent, big discussion. So narrowing down that to 1 minute, I guess I'm not understanding the logic of that, because it's probably going to be the same number of people that would
Just at
normally
different
come,
points.
just at different points of the agenda. So why would we take away 2 minutes of their time to express themselves?
So when we had the 1 minute, when we were doing this previously, there was public comments at the beginning and public comments at the end and public comments throughout the meeting. To where at the public comments at the beginning were agenda items only, and then you had an opportunity to come up for 1 minute without signing up, and then you had, the last public comments were for anything, non-agenda related. So, I mean, yes, we do want to hear from the public. I know that's important to council, it's important to staff. But you also have the business of the meeting that you got to get. So,
But we're
but
not
whether it's
having
1
public
minute, 2
comments
minutes,
at the
3 minutes, I
beginning,
mean,
right?
it's really up to what council has
Yeah.
the appetite for. If
Yeah.
y'all want it to be 3 minutes
Well, we
and
can always
limit
change
it.
it again,
Do
right?
what?
If it turns out it's too long,
So let's start with the 1 minute, and then if
we
we,
could always up it.
you
we
can
need
always
more.
up it.
We could, so maybe something that Mayor Pro Tem Miller said, we could even include language that it's 1 minute, but council may extend that time at their discretion. So if it's a big topic item and you are hearing in the community that, hey, a lot of people want to talk on that, then as the mayor goes to call for those public comments on that agenda item, we could word it to where you've got the flexibility to open it up to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever you want to. I mean, just so you can stay flexible within it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of agenda items, you're probably not gonna hear anything on, and some you will, just depending on the topic. Even looking at like next Wednesday's meeting, there's some things where there may be some comments on, but I think there's more things where there's not gonna be any comments on. So, but we can try to get creative with the language in this to afford you the opportunity to flex if you want, or if council wants to decide on 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
This is no
I mean,
sign up, right?
it really doesn't matter to us.
Right, it's not a sign up.
No, this one's not a sign up.
I think
spirit-
having the
go ahead, Brian.
flexibility of being able to extend past 1 minute is key. People, the residents might have questions, and the particular staff resource or council might be able to answer that question, but might go way over the 1 minute. And then if the resident has more follow-up questions or something like that, it might just lead to more. So I think having that flexibility is key.
Yeah, I think the purpose, at least my understanding from conversations with fellow council members, the spirit of this is transparency and communication with the residents. And if we exercise discretion to a topic that's important to the residents or important to the city to allow additional time, I think, I agree with you, Brian, that we probably should have that flexibility, but also, I don't want to go the wrong direction and act like we're being discriminatory and saying, well, gosh, Charlie can have 4 minutes but Steve can only have 1 minute.
I think that's where you start
I
to
think
get
we want to be
into
careful
a
with that
problem
because
with that.
we want to be fair, back to Charlie's comment. We'll be fair and consistent.
Yeah. I mean, consistency's key. I mean, and it could be that, I mean,
About 2 minutes.
to me, the simplest thing is to determine amount of time.
Listen, we've never done it before. I'd say we start small and go from there.
Start at 2? Should we do 2?
A minute.
2? 1 minute? What do you
Two?
think?
I'm not in for.
Can
for
I get 1.5?
minute.
You're not in for a minute?
I'm not in for a minute.
You're not in for a
I'm
minute?
not in
What
for
do
a
you
minute.
want? What are you looking
What, you
for?
want 5, 10?
I don't know why we're taking time away.
You
I
want to sit
mean,
down in a lawn chair? and
Why do we have to
sit
take
at it?
time away?
yeah, why do we have to take time, why do we have to take
So
the?
if as a
3 now.
resident, I want to speak for a minute on a zoning
Then
issue,
you
and
can
I want to
speak-
speak for 3 minutes in public comments, why can't I do that?
You can.
Okay. Then why,
But-
how are we taking time away?
Because if we limit it to 1 during the agenda item, they don't get 3. You know what I mean? So they didn't sign up because I knew they could come up
But
and carry
actually, you're
them.
getting 4. 'Cause
Yeah.
3 and 1 is 4.
Yeah, you're getting 4.
Well, yeah,
Or
and
you sign up for
another
that.
thing to
But it's
keep in
not
mind
specific to
is
that.
if it's a zoning type thing, I know we're just using that example, there's a public hearing
Right.
where they get up during the public hearing before it ever comes to an actionable item. to where they've got their 3 minutes there. Then when it becomes an actual item, if you're at a minute, they can take a minute then as well.
I
Now,
wanna
granted, that's
seek to
not
understand your
Every
comment.
agenda item is not a zoning item, but
Yep. I want to understand your comment better. I don't think I'm following you.
Well, I mean, I'm just really basic. Right now, everyone gets a chance to speak during public comments, and they get 3 minutes to say their piece, right?
In the beginning, too.
In the
Before we
beginning.
vote.
Typically at the
Before we
beginning of the
vote,
meeting, right.
Before we vote, we have heard from people after people taking their 1 minute and sometimes really screeching just past it, right? So now we're saying that in those critical conversations, we're giving you 1 minute. You can have 3 minutes at the end when it doesn't have to do anything with our critical conversation, but in that one critical conversation, we have 1 minute. I don't think that that's the right direction if we're talking about allowing people a different opportunity to talk about something that we are deciding on. That's just my perspective. Why, I don't think you're gonna have an increase of the number of people talking. You're not gonna increase the time that you're spending listening. It's not gonna increase, the time that you have for the meeting. It's just that you're taking away 2 minutes from every person that has something important to say about what we are just going to be voting on in a lot of cases.
Where in the past, well, currently, they get to do that before we vote in the beginning. If we move normal public comments to the end, they don't get that.
They don't get
Right.
that
Only get
opportunity,
a minute.
right.
That's conversation.
That's what I'm saying.
I think I understand what you're saying now, right. So ordinarily, they had 3 minutes before the vote.
Correct.
Now we're only giving them 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
if you keep public comments at the end.
If we put, yes, correct.
I like the idea of having people come and talk specifically to the agenda items at that time.
That's a good
So-
perspective, Carmen, and I think that's really considerate to the residents to think of it that way. So, having said that, would you feel more comfortable if we kept public comments towards the front of the meeting and still gave them a minute on the agenda items?
Well, I think the reason that we talked about moving public comments to the end was to be able to move through the agenda with the things that were most important to the people that were here to talk to us about, right? That was if I'm remembering
And
right,
so,
that
and
was
so
the
that
purpose of-
if somebody had a question and council felt comfortable in asking it, they could cover it almost immediately after.
Right.
Because council comments would follow
Yeah.
the public comments
And 9
versus
times-
I ask my questions at the beginning
Yeah.
of the meeting and now I've got to wait
2 hours
through
later.
the entire meeting
Yeah.
before council could address it.
And a lot of times
was
they're
the
motivated to leave
conversation
because the
on
meeting
moving it,
runs
so-
long.
Right.
And sometimes the questions that are asked during that time are important questions that can even impact the way that we're thinking about an item that we're going to be discussing or considering. So I think it makes sense to have those comments as those items come up. And then to have people talk about whatever else that's not on the agenda at the end of it, because those are important too, but it gives us an opportunity to focus on why we're here that particular day.
So
We
where
can
are we
always
at
change
on
it
the
too.
time?
I mean, it's always edible, so.
So it sounds like, and I agree with the philosophy that you've shared, and I think that's probably a good direction for us. So I would say, my question for fellow council members would be, should we leave public comments at the beginning of the meeting, or should we allow more time for agenda comments?
Following the same philosophy,
Where we can answer the question.
yeah.
Public comments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Leave those, in that way, it's fresh in everybody's mind, the question everybody's asking, and we can get to that question.
So what are you thinking for agenda item comments, Carmen, on time?
3 minutes.
3 minutes?
That's
Keep
what
it
they had
consistent, yeah.
before.
Keep it consistent with what's going on with public comments.
Yeah.
if
And
it
then-
gets
and
out
then
of
it's
hand,
focused
we
on
can
that.
shorten
Yeah.
it. It turns out we're.
And I
mean,
think we
if
also
you-
need to take in consideration the time that it's going to take for public comments for each agenda item, and then look at how long it's going to take for public comments as well with the 3 minutes, because that's going to add a lot of time, I think, to the meeting. And we've already had a couple of very long meetings, and so I think we need to maybe look into considering possibly limiting the amount of time overall for the public comments at the end,
And I think
but
that
not
we'll be able to
necessarily
see
the
that.
agenda item.
Gauge
Yeah.
that, yeah.
We'll be able to gauge that as we move through agenda items. I mean, when we have an agenda that has 10 different items that we're going to be discussing, having 5 people speak to every agenda item is probably not going to be but if we have 5 people speaking at every agenda item, oh my gosh, then that means they're really interested and they want to know and they have questions.
concerned
and
about
we should
it.
be really glad that they're here.
Right, there should be,
Yeah,
could
and
be
they should be
valuable
heard.
things we need to consider before a vote. And that also may limit the amount of time someone spends in general public comments, if they have that opportunity.
Well, in other places too, they limit the amount. So they would have, say, an agenda item, and you would have a limited of 10 people that could speak to that,
Yeah, we can limit that.
with that. So that, you know,
Okay.
you can curb your time as you can with those folks that wanted to get up and speak. Now, the thing is with that is, you know, how do you, what, we're gonna draw straws? Are we gonna take numbers? I mean,
Well,
we're gonna put a
In
number.
in other
People at
places,
30
it's
minutes.
based on the sign-up list. And,
Yep.
yeah, where,
Well,
I mean,
first come,
think
first
Casey-
can't
served
we
type
just
deal.
have a sign-up list then that is for agenda items and one for end of meeting public comments?
so if you want to go that route, which we can, I would make a recommendation that they have to sign up.
Before the meeting.
We could have something on the website
Oh, yeah, I don't.
where
On the
they
agenda
sign up
list.
ahead of time. Yeah, and it could be day of, up until 4 o'clock or something like that. But, and, I mean, there's several boards and councils that do that.
That do that, yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't like about that is someone shows up to a meeting, they're listening.
Right.
Or chief gets up, gives a presentation about something we're gonna vote on, and then, okay, public comments, someone says, oh, I have a question based on that, now they
Right.
can't talk. 'cause then-
Yeah,
Right.
and I think that tends to, again, if this is about communication, transparency, and wanting to pull people into, you know, what is happening, I think that kind of is counterproductive to that. But as far as how many people get to talk, again, if we have that many people, then it's really good engagement. And I doubt that we see that more than maybe a couple times a year, so I'm really not that
concerned.
worried about how long people are gonna talk. And if we start to see that the meetings get clunky, then we can talk about it again. But at this point, I just don't see that being a big issue.
Probably right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your meeting agenda for Monday night. Unfinished business, you've got 2 items. I really don't know that we'll have much, if any, public comments on either one of those. They're second reads on ordinances.
Right.
I doubt very seriously you'll have more than 1 or 2, if you even have that many. Under new business,
It's all regulatory.
honestly, I don't know that you have anything under the new business that would elicit public comments. I mean, you've got,
There's one. I'd say 6C might get a few,
potentially,
but none of them, I don't see any of them being more than 1 or 2 people.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, so I
they're not-
mean-
they're not earth-shattering agenda items.
right. So, I mean, yeah, I do agree with you, Ms. Miller, that, yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to happen on a very consistent
And you
basis.
guys keep telling me that the agendas are not gonna be controversial every single time, so I'm really counting on that.
I don't think we have anything controversial on this one.
You just jinxed it.
I don't think we've got anyone from anything controversial.
I'd say
for
let's
Monday
take it
night.
for a test drive for 3 minutes and see how it goes. If we're here till midnight, we can throttle it back.
Okay. And with a single motion and vote, council can amend or undo a resolution. So, if we get into it and y'all feel like, wow, this is way too much, then at the next meeting, you just motion to amend that, the local rules to 1 minute instead of 3, and y'all can do that.
Yeah, I think all of the residents that have taken their time to come to the council meetings and watch the council meetings and staff and council, out of consideration for them, we don't want the meetings to run until 11:30 every month, but we do want people to have a voice. So I like you standing for that, and I support that certainly.
Thank you very much.
See where it goes.
Okay, we'll make that change.
Does rules, they're not on here, but would it include, I think it would, modifications or about like Robert's rules and the way we're interpreting them and the way we're, you know, because you don't have to use Robert rules exactly. We can come up with our own rules if we want to.
Yep.
My question about that is, there's 2 of them. So the first is amendments, right? So the last 2 years, someone makes a motion, someone makes a second, we talk about it, and it's like, well, I would really like to make a change to this line here, you know, whatever it may be. All right, well, you got to rescind your second, rescind your first, make a new motion
Restate
with
your
a
motion.
change in it. Every other legislative body I've watched or seen,
Right.
it seems like they have the ability to make amendments after the motion, right? When they're during discussion, someone makes a motion to make an amendment to
To
line item
amend the
6C.
amendment. You're amending, it's a motion to amend the amendment. That's
Motion
what
to amend
the amend.
agenda.
Now, I think what he's
To
talking about
the-
is
to
motioning
the-
to
sec-
amend the motion
motion.
that
the
got
motion,
made.
yeah.
Correct.
That's what you're talking about, right? Somebody makes a motion in a second, and y'all start discussion, and somebody says, well, I'd like to see a change on this.
Yes.
On the actual, like, ordinance.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
You don't wanna make- I
so
make
to
a motion
capture
to make
that
an
on a
amendment.
first read, it'd have to be included in the motion. I understand what you're talking about. I don't know what Robert's Rules says on that. I can tell you that that's just been our general practice for as long as I can remember, repealing a second and then restating a motion and going that way. But if Robert's Rules allows, well, because I think where we run into an issue is you've got a motion and a second. At some point, that requires an action. So you've got to take those off the floor before you can have the motion and second that you want to actually vote on, if that motion's getting amended.
You know, I was under the impression you could make an amendment to the existing
You can.
bill, ordinance, whatever you're debating, that's been seconded. That gets voted on, whether you want to make that change. So if it's, change it from 25 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour, I'm just making something up. And, okay, I want to make a motion to make an amendment to change it from 25 to 50 miles an hour. And someone,
But not between Molokai and
whatever, then
Windjammer.
someone has to second that.
Right.
Right.
And we vote on that, just that change. We're not passing the ordinance.
Right.
We're just changing the one section of that ordinance. That's now adopted. Casey makes a note. Then we vote on the entire ordinance. That's the current motion. It's my understanding the way
With the
the amendments
amendment.
work, and, you know.
That motion on the floor with the amendment,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
That's what you're
exactly.
saying,
yeah. You're making an amendment, not to an amendment, but to the motion, right? You're-
Making an
you're-
amendment to the actual ordinance that we're debating.
Right.
or resolution.
Right, but so if
You have
the,
to
so
restate the
to make sure I'm following you, so let's say you make a motion to approve the ordinance, make a motion to approve ordinance X. And ordinance X says that everybody can drive 50 miles an hour on TK Drive.
Right, and then somebody
right?
seconds it.
And somebody seconds it, and y'all have your discussion, and somebody says, I'm not comfortable with 50, I'd rather it be 40.
Yeah. So
Okay.
make a motion
Well,
to
so
amend it.
so you've got a motion and a second that's on the floor to approve the ordinance. Now you're wanting to make that change to the way I understand it is you've got to take if you've got a motion and a second on the floor, you've got to take action on that. It's either vote on it or, okay, I understand you made a good point, let's make it 40, not 50. I'll withdraw my second, I'll restate my motion to, and,
problem
make
with
the
that
change
is
to
now
40.
A minority would have control, because, for example, I say minority in that, now only two people control the complete floor, the complete debate, because if they don't rescind their second, there's no change. You have to vote on it.
That's a
as
good
is,
point.
And that's what
Yep.
amendments are for.
That's right.
Are to amend the existing discussion.
So what it takes for an ordinance to be drafted, right, it meets legalese, and we've talked about it several times individually and with Charlie and with maybe a
Staff
staff
member, yep.
liaison, staff member, multiple times. It finally gets here for a vote. We want that vote. Like, we want that to move forward in a positive direction, with or without an amendment. There's room for collaboration and compromise with an amendment item like that. So using that example, we want to change the speed limit to 50, I'm okay with changing the speed limit, but let's only go to 45. I'm okay with that discussion and that amendment. I think we should have that flexibility.
Because you can't debate it prior to the motion,
Correct.
or the second. That's the problem.
That's right.
Let me research
That's
that.
something we
a
don't
li-
decide
yeah.
tonight. I just want to bring that up.
Yeah, so I'm sure Robert's Rules speaks to it, because council has adopted Robert's Rules.
Yep.
And then you get to supplement Robert's Rules with your local rules. Let me work through that with Bob McCleve as far as what specifically Robert's Rules says. And then I'll circle back around with all the council on that.
Yeah, that was just something I wanted to bring up. Yeah.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be decided. We're not deciding that tonight.
No, we're just talking about it.
It's just a discussion.
Yep.
Anything else on rules anyone wants to bring up? local rules?
So we're going with 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Unlimited folks that can speak. And keep public comments at the end.
Now, are we going to vote on that on Monday? We need a single vote?
So we can have that resolution put together, add it to the agenda, and have it for you for Monday. Casey would just have to change everything, change it tomorrow and add it in there. If that's the only change that y'all have got to the red line, that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
She may already have it done as we're sitting here right now. But yeah, I mean, we can have it ready for you for Monday night.
Okay.
What are we doing with general comments, beginning or end?
And
End? So that's the change too, right?
No,
No,
that
it's
was
still-
at the end already.
I'm still in already.
Okay.
Okay. So we good with that?
Good,
Everybody?
moving forward?
Okay,
Okay, we'll get that ready for y'all for Monday night.
Thanks.
okay.
How you feeling? You almost have your color back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you look a little, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got to do yard work today, so that was
Always fun.
I had flashbacks of 2020 doing some household projects there.
in the heat.
Yeah, that's right. Got some fresh air though.
Mayor, members of council, thanks for having me again tonight to discuss our favorite topic, deer. Guess I'll turn this on. There we go. So I want to begin the presentation. We get asked a lot of questions with what's the true community impact of deer in our community? And we talk about it, and I think it's important to provide some data to kind of answer some questions from the public. Before I get into all this data, I think it's important to note that all this information has been published on our website for wildlife management for public consumption. The only thing that hasn't been added is some of the landscaping that Tim just did over this past week, and that will be added tomorrow. So the first one that we get is how many motor vehicle accidents have deer caused. Chief Crosby and the staff put together this data for us. In 2021 and 2022, you saw that we had 13, and that number dropped to 6 this previous year. So that's where we're at on motor vehicle accidents for those that are interested. This one's interesting. So you're going to see deer removal, and for the people that are with us and looking at home, the chart on the green line is what we were removing during our 21-22 budget year. So that runs from October 1 to September 30th. The blue line shows from 22 to 23. And then the yellow line up top is the current budget year, 23-24. As you can see, we've had a staggering jump. If you start tracking quarter 3 of 22 through 23, you saw a large increase from previous numbers from 12 to 49. And then from quarter 4, a jump from 26 to 68. So those last 2 quarters have continued that upward trend with the first 2 quarters of this year as well, with 60 and then 45. This quarter hasn't ended, but that's where we're at right now. So we've seen a significant uptick. If we duplicate quarter 3 and quarter 4, we'll be at 222 deer for the budget year that we've picked up.
Joey, is that fiscal year or is that calendar year?
Fiscal year.
Okay, so where you have quarter 1, is that September?
That
Is this
October,
November,
November, December.
Okay.
Yes. And then if you have any questions as I go through, obviously feel free to ask them as we're going through. Landscaping. So we have our landscape expert, Tim Gillette. He drove through the city, and that will be reflected in our next slide. But he evaluated the green spaces around the community and kind of looked through what damage are deer's causing to the community, not only within our green spaces, but what he's observing in people's yards and stuff as well. So some of the things as city staff that we've done to help counter our landscaping is we've just adjusted. We've adjusted some of the things that we've planted. We're using some protection over certain things that we're planting, to barriers to help mitigate deer damage. we're not planting flowers in the fall as we used to, because you plant them and then 2 weeks later they're gone. So we're being a lot more strategic with how we handle our landscaping. As you can see, Joe, our landscaper, likes to use a lot of boulders as well. So they're typically pretty deer-proof as well. So those are some things that we've kind of done. Those are some things that we've kind of done as within the city maintained area. And then obviously we've gotten a lot of concerns from private residents with all the challenges that they've had with their landscaping as well. So this chart in front of you shows all the different segments in the community kind of broken down, and it shows you kind of the impact that they've had in certain areas that Tim has observed. This was just done this past week, so it's pretty recent. As we continue to look at this, Tim will be monitoring this. It'll be a lot more beneficial and create accuracy as the leaves start coming in. So probably another calculation, May or June, that Tim will look through and get that data for you. As you can see, in a lot of your traditional areas are where you're seeing the most damage to the underlying shrub area in the woods, which obviously impacts native species that, could lead to their removal from the area, and then long-term could potentially lead to some erosion as well. So those are kind of the community impacts that we hear about. We want to share that data with the city, with the residents, and then with y'all as well as what we're observing as well. Yes, sir.
The damage that was noted was, did I hear you correctly that was in green spaces and city-owned property, or was there observations done on private property as well?
Both.
Both?
Okay. Both. So this previous week, we met with the USDA as kind of a follow-up conversation of, the culling that took place in January and February. A lot of the challenges and opportunities were noted in the after action report, and we wanted to meet as a group to further explore those to see what opportunities that we had to kind of push through some of those challenges. Chief Crosby was in attendance with the meeting along with Councilman Shirley. So if there's anything that I missed through the process of this, feel free to jump in as well. But a lot of things that was identified by USDA of potentially leading to more successful results, talked about more flexibility when it comes to their operations, which included daytime shooting, lengthening of hours, mobile shooting, and potentially private property, utilizing private property. So the challenge with that is that you kind of have a decision that you have to make, unfortunately, with culling. And speaking to the USDA and then a subsequent conversation with Dr. DeNicola, the standard practice for their operations is that they go out. There's no police presence to monitor the area. They have their own safety measures in place, but they're allowed to conduct the business as they see needed to complete the mission. So that created the uniqueness of our area with, obviously you're going to have challenges either way. You're either going to handcuff USDA's ability to perform, or you're going to handcuff your chief in order to put in the safety measures that he sees fit. So through conversations with Chief Crosby, we have the utmost faith in the USDA that if it is the decision that they perform without the control under PD, then he's on board with that. We support that. If you want how January 22nd and February 5th looked in those weeks of operation, then he's on board with that. And I think that's the decision that you have to come to. If you try to find middle ground between, all right, well, we're just going to let them do this one thing, or, okay, we're going to take away that one thing, you're going to ultimately impact the effectiveness of both sides. So it's not an easy decision, but it's something that you kind of have to consider moving forward if you do decide to cull again, as to whether you allow for them to fully operate as they see fit or continue the same measures that Chief Crosby has in place, but understand that it may hinder the results, and obviously it will cause the cost to go up as well as a result of that. The other thing that's important that they stressed, depending on the flexibility, is the utilization of private property by getting those clusters of homes that will be on board to shoot, because there's only so much you're going to be able to do within the golf course area. There's only so many times you're going to be able to go to that area before it's going to be really challenging, regardless of whether you have that flexibility or not, to actually continue culling in those areas. So I think that's another important factor. Obviously, that leads to a whole nother challenge. But speaking to Dr. DeNicola and speaking to the USDA, these are standard practices that they utilize through their operations. So food for thought. Before I go to the other slide, I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the culling aspect.
Talk to me about the daytime shooting, Joey. These guys, they want to come in and shoot on the golf course in the daytime.
That is another consideration that you would have to shut down the golf course. Obviously, you probably look at times where it's impacted least amount, the Novembers, the December timeframes that you're looking at.
Rounds of golf that we're playing November, December.
Correct.
Unless it's freezing. Now, when the greens, when it's freezing and we've got the tarps over the greens and that kind of thing, if those folks could be flexible enough to come in during those times,
the important thing to understand for everyone that's watching, there is not an easy answer or solution.
Correct.
Every single potential answer comes with some type of downside, and that's the difficulty of the decision y'all face. In all honesty, nothing's that. All right, yes, 100%. This is right.
Well, the problem I see is we're spending this money. We're spending it, and one of the key ways that we make money in TEK is that golf course. That is our cash cow, and we're talking about taking money away that we've got revenues coming in, so that we can spend it. I'm not good with it. With daytime shooting.
Can I take that one, Joey?
Yeah, absolutely.
This isn't a Joey thing. This was something that USDA recommended.
No.
And I'll
Correct.
maybe
None
give
of
you
these are my recommendations.
Right. Yes, I don't want anybody. I don't want anybody to think Joey's the bad guy.
Just the
here.
messenger.
All right. So I'm just trying to give you a pass here.
Thank you.
But the gentleman from USDA made that as a possible recommendation. They didn't say this is what we have to do, this is what we want to do. They just said this is what we do elsewhere, and it's an option here if you guys would entertain it. And the way he recommended it was along the lines of, we have 3 sets of 9 holes on our golf course. It's ideal for them to go to, say, 3 different holes on the Pines where they could be really productive, and we close the Pines, and the Cove and the Grandview are open for service. And that's where people will play golf. And if we allow USDA to choose 3 holes on the Pines, and we're just using this as an example, right? They're going to be in areas that won't be in any proximity to the other holes. And any strategic placement of their people are going to be where the backdrop is a berm or is a draw or is a pond or something like that, where there's no chance of a stray bullet going anywhere. I wanted to help you clarify what they shared.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, what they're seeing during this last time is that during the feeding, it was, I believe they said between 3 and 4 o'clock that they're coming in. And it's just one of those things where you have an opportunity to be more successful, but at what cost? That's the question you have to answer. And then, in terms of they have to track the pattern of the deer. That's going to dictate your success, whether they're sitting there for hours. But if they're seeing trends that between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning, this is where the deer are active, then they want to have the flexibility to be able to do that. They can't do that and then also ask Chief Crosby and his staff to be on the ready at 2 to 4 a.m. So, you know, it's a lot of healthy food for thought.
Question on the safety of this. USDA has been doing this for a really long time. They have, I'm sure, written protocols and standards. To your knowledge, have they ever had any type of incident where safety has been compromised in any way?
To my knowledge, no.
He commented on that
Yeah,
in the meeting.
and
Said there
during the
was
meeting
zero.
he did as well.
Yeah.
I'll go even further to share with at length with my conversation with Dr. DiNicola that the only way he would be willing to put in a proposal to Cole is if he was given the freedom to be able to operate as basically having an officer on call as needed. So
I think that's what USDA said also, right? That they didn't see a success pattern based on with the protocols that were in place before.
with the protocols in place, you're going to continue to see the increased cost, and you're going to
Low production.
experience the low production. So that's the challenge of it. And like I said, we feel confident in whether it's USDA or Dr. DiNicola be able to perform it with their safety measures in place and feel confident with everything, but understand that there's a public perception of
Does it make sense to have a police officer with them? Not the security, but just if there's 3 USDA guys on a team, have an officer accompanying them. So if there's an issue, they can just handle it instead of calling and.
I wouldn't feel comfortable answering that question. That'd have to be
No,
Chief
it's something I just
Crosby.
down
Yeah.
the road to ask
Absolutely.
and talk about. And
I think we talked about that as an option in the meeting with USDA, and Joey or Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but they said that the operations that they've been a part of, they've had situations where, like we did here, where the officers were in close proximity, they were securing the area, and our chief and PD did a remarkable job of that. I can't take anything away from them executing that plan successfully, but they've also had everything from that extreme to zero police presence, and they just do their job. And if somebody interferes or there's a trespasser or protester or something like that, and they feel like they need assistance, they call for help, and the police that are on patrol will come and visit that area. They've had protesters sitting right under their stand, not interfering in any way with the operation, but wanting to be there, wanting to be observing and protesting. And they continue to carry out their operation.
What-
As they move forward.
Another part of it is you got to consider that a lot of their operations conducted in the state are through HOAs and stuff, where
Right.
that's not even an option to have a police presence.
What if, I was just thinking today, what if we were to, instead of utilizing our officers to secure an area, what if we brought in a security, outside of private
Security
firm,
company?
Security company to, no? Okay. There goes that idea.
Hey,
Thanks, Chief. All right, yeah, I got
listen,
the look.
don't, I had that question too. I was afraid to ask it, so thank you.
Okay. All right. There goes that idea. Never mind.
Any
all
other
right.
questions regarding the coaling portion of it?
Oh, private property.
Yes.
There are several cities around us that utilize archery clubs. And with the archery clubs, these guys go to the private property. They say, hey, I'm going to be hunting here this afternoon. Is it okay if I have to enter your property? Is that okay? With private property, I mean, Scott, you've got a perch behind your house that's second to none and a whole lot of numbers. I've got a whole lot of numbers behind mine. I mean, you can look at the landscaping deal that you guys have got, and yeah, my yard has been destroyed and everything around it has been destroyed. I can't keep anything, even plastic plants. They're eating my plastic plants now. It's ridiculous.
They're adapting.
Annie buys
Right.
these little pretty little flowers, and she puts
Must be
them on
some
the back
nutrition
deck.
in there.
And those jerkers get up on the back deck and they'll sit there and they literally munch on plastic flowers and just litter the backyard with plastic flowers. It's ridiculous. But
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go. Sorry.
but in that, utilizing private, I mean, did they? I mean, what kind of success did they have in utilizing private property? Like that?
Quite a bit, and Dr. DiNicola shared that as well. Basically, the key is you're getting a cluster of 4 or 5 homes that have frequent deer visits and are okay with it, and allows them to set up on their back decks.
So would they bring like all 6 guys in at one time? And
I can't speak to the specifics of that operation, but like I said, I know it sounds crazy, but these are common practices that, like I said, if culling is going to be a path forward, there's only so many times you're going to be able to utilize the golf course area. We only have so many limited green space options, and I know it sounds outrageous, but like I said, it's common practice.
What one of the things that Noel shared with us, or maybe it was one of his men, he said that when they got permission from some residents to use their private property, they went and surveyed several residents around there, and if all of them were okay with it, they had a map. They marked those houses with green highlighter,
Yeah.
right? Call me a liar if I'm
You
off of this.
would have to get buy-in from.
Yep, and he had red
large
marks
swaths
on
of
homes
areas,
that weren't
yes.
okay with it. So that meant
Yeah.
they can't operate in that property. They can't retrieve a deer from that property. They have to stay out of that red line property.
the other question about that would be, these guys are getting paid. Are we paying by the hour for them to go do the research on that to give them?
I don't know how that would
be
We
done.
didn't get into
yeah,
the
we didn't ask the logistics on
details.
that.
From my understanding, it kind of sounded like they handled the agreements from our meeting, but
Yeah,
we didn't
there's
get
a
into
no
the.
trespass form, a standard form that USDA uses with the private property owner.
Okay.
I will say, as we get into the sterilization portion of this, Dr. DiNicola would be looking for the same thing
Yeah.
to be able to issue to go.
Well, see, and-
Especially for a retrieval standpoint, I'll get into that when we get into sterilization. But
So I've gotten residents that have reached out and said, I'm volunteering my house. Is it just, is the process one house, or is it that it has to be?
ideally, you would have clusters of it. I would imagine that we would have some type of engagement via, sending out emails or Facebook posts, encouraging residents that would allow for participation to reach out to us so that we can kind of coordinate with the USDA. But I would say that if you have one house and then two, and each beside it's a no, that's probably not going to be a viable location.
Okay, so there is some consideration given
Absolutely.
to the
To the
people that-
residents, yeah.
Like I said, you're probably looking at a cluster of 3 or 4 homes in order for them to feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable to be in that area.
And back to your comment, if I may, Mayor, although the archery option is something that's very widely used across the country, Dr. DiNicola and even Dr. Ruth recommended against it because of the recovery issue.
Yeah, you got to get we got to get the numbers down first
Right.
before we can even consider that.
Yeah.
But I would be interested to see if they're going to charge us for doing homework. Because if they're going to go walk around all these places and folks, and they're paying the guys.
Like I
I
said,
don't know that
think
we'd
it-
ask them to do that. I don't know. I think we have resources to, to do
that's
that.
where I would see.
We're going to do like a sign up genius.
Yeah, that's where I kind of see the reduction of the cost. I think there would be some upfront
Not a bad
work
idea.
from the city of engaging via the methods that we have to gauge interest first. And then once it's like, okay, we're seeing a pocket off of Molokai or, Gulfview Crest, then you're, okay, USDA, because the agreement would be through the USDA, not through the city.
Well, we do have a lot of areas in the Greenbelt that could be utilized as far as, Executive Point being one of those places. There's a lot of wooded area behind there, but you just can't access it because
Pitcairn Park.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas like that we've got a lot of deer that travel back there. Executive Point is probably up there with Molokai. If I had to put it up there, it's up there with where we're at, because we're getting deer that we have to retrieve.
the other important part that I should note is that Noel had mentioned that, you know, if we do decide to go for culling next year, that he would start with the 80 and see where we're at from there before recommending any type of additional request for tags.
Well, I think too, we could request more tags. I mean, I certainly, if we decided to go that way again, I would certainly, if we were able to fill those 80 tags, we needed more tags, I could certainly go down and be willing to, more than happy to go down and request more tags if we needed it from DNR.
Councilman Shirley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe to the effect Noel said that under the current guidelines that were set from a safety standpoint, that maybe over the course of the year they could get to 80, but you're talking about a significant amount of man time between USDA and TCPD to get there, which is going to be an exorbitant cost. So,
well, and that's the thing with TCPD. Our guys did an excellent job. Our ladies and gentlemen, they did an excellent job. But you got folks that are having a, you know, like Chief. There was mornings where Chief took a shower, went back to work.
Mm-hmm. It took a toll.
You can't do that forever.
Absolutely did.
Now, one of the
Doesn't
things
make sense money-wise to do, if we only get 80.
Yeah.
You got to spend $500,000 and wear out the entire police department.
I would agree. If you consider culling, unfortunately, I think you're looking at the option. You have those two options, but the realistic option from a cost standpoint would be to allow the vendors to conduct business as they standardly do.
So
with
we had,
that flexibility.
for this season, we had 160 deer tags. We only got 36, which left like 124. I don't know, because I'm not a hunter or anything like that. The 124 tags, are they no good? Are they null and void now?
They were null and void March 1st of this year. So we'd have to reapply in September for a permit for this coming up year if we went that route.
The converse of what Joey shared about Noel saying that it would take him the whole 6 or 7 months to get 80 deer. On the converse of that, he said if his team had the flexibility to operate the way they typically do, he could get 80 deer in 2 weeks.
Okay, so that was the clarification I was looking for, because I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
It was dependent on.
Thanks for adding that, but it would be a lot more efficient. They would anticipate a lot more efficient process.
Right.
Anticipate, I think, is the key word.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that when they went in this year with the 6 dates, fully anticipating being able to get 80
felt
during
pretty
those 6
confident.
dates, but with the safety measures that we put in place, obviously they weren't able to get there.
Yeah.
It
wasn't ideal for production, but I think, man, it'd be hard not to support the way we did it because we didn't know what we didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I think what Chief and his team did was right in line with what we would have expected.
I agree 100%. I think we
we
safely
had to do
figured
that.
out a lot of things over this first go-round, no doubt.
Good information. Anybody ready to go to the sterilization part?
Sure.
All right, on sterilization. So I had an initial conversation with Dr. Ruth before I spoke to Dr. DeNicola. I asked him if there are any limits to sterilization or when it could actually take place, and there are not within the state of South Carolina, so we can sterilize as many deer as we would like. The timeline that Dr. DeNicola recommended would be through mid-September through mid-February. And then we'll get into that a little more on my final slide, but what he would envision is that we kind of set the ideal number that we want to get to, and then he would be there for an extended period of time to be able to meet that number. And we can talk sterilization as we get into my final slide, but it kind of leads us into where the discussion needs to take us. So when thinking about developing goals and objectives for what you hope to achieve with deer, I think you've got to look at it as a perspective of 2 years, because that's what you have together as a council. And I think any direction that y'all have should be reflected in that, because you could set this 5-year plan in place that may only be supported for 2 years. So that creates a challenge of setting into motion spending $100,000 or $150,000, $200,000 for the first 2 years, and then year 3 it's shut down. Why did we do that for? So I think that's something you have to consider. And as part of that, and my head was going there, and it's funny that Noel with USDA mentioned it, and also a conversation with Dr. DiNicola with what do you recommend? And it really comes down to push all your chips in the middle of the table for these next 2 years or do nothing. And if you have any feedback from someone that has taken this in for the last 2+ months, that's the conclusion that I've drawn for whatever it's worth for one person that doesn't have a vote. I think in speaking with Dr. DiNicola, about 50% of his the initial jump, they go hard the first year or two, and then they reevaluate and see where they're at, and then make adjustments. And the perfect analogy for this is a boat with holes in it. And I feel like if we're going to invest $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year, we're going to slowly start plugging holes, but you're still going to have those holes that are still overflowing. Whereas you really truly invest in this over the next 2 years, then you're plugging a lot of holes, and at that point, maybe you're just pitching a bucket of water out. So that sounds ideal, but it comes with a significant cost, and I think that's the challenge to all this, and that's the reason why the other option is doing nothing. Because if you're looking at doing some form of culling and sterilization, you're probably talking about upwards of probably $500,000. And while there's an opportunity with leftover funds from this past year to fund some of those operations, you're probably still looking at close to $360,000 that you're looking for in this upcoming budget to fund this operation of some type. I think no matter what, if you're going with a wildlife management program, it has to be some type of hybrid to where you're sterilizing and some form of culling. I think culling helps with the initial amount of it, but you're going to start getting diminishing returns if you're only going to the golf course. So sterilization, obviously you have the long-term impact, but you're not getting rid of the deer. They're still going to be there. But when you bake in the attrition rate that we've seen over the last year, I mean, it's significant. You're talking about over 200 deer that we're probably going to be picking up over this year. So between that, the culling, the sterilization, you know, I think you kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel maybe if you invest in this. But you have to prioritize wildlife management if this is what you want to do. That means looking at it in comparison to infrastructure or pickleball courts or anything that goes in the budget. You have certain things in the budget that you know you're going to have to pay for to operate the city. You can't touch that. So only that, you have a limited pool of money that you have to consider for this upcoming year. And that's the challenge of the decision at hand, is that you have to decide how big of a priority is wildlife management. And through there, I think you can determine your goals over the next 2 years as a council. I know I just threw a lot. But I think it's an important thing that you have to consider as you come to a conclusion on how you want to handle this.
I mean, doing nothing is a valid option.
It is.
I mean,
it absolutely is.
We're fortunate in some aspects that we actually can potentially afford to do something. A lot of cities couldn't afford to do anything.
Right.
So we're fortunate from that aspect that we do have some money. Mm-hmm. Everyone listening at home, we don't have that much money. Right. We don't have a lot of money. We run a lean budget. But I just throw that out there because we're fortunate in that aspect. But is that where we want to spend our money?
Well, have we looked into grants?
I've not been privy to any grants that exist for this.
Question I was going to have as well. I know PZP 22 isn't like federally out there yet, and you need to get like a research permit or a research grant to go off and do it.
Dr.
So-
Ruth won't write another
They won't
research.
do it?
Yeah, so I'll
PZP.
I didn't touch on the darting in the vaccinations, and I'll touch on why. So with your standard PZP and Gonacon, we put this up on the website so you could kind of look at Dr. DiNicola's proposals, but you're constantly having to reinforce the treatment, which just doesn't make it cost effective long term.
Yeah.
You have a PZ22 and then a Spavac that they're not really. There's potential merit there, but I don't think we're far enough down the road with either one of those to give it serious consideration. And as the
We don't have
mayor
to
just
touch them in the
said,
first
Dr.
place to tag
Ruth's
them.
not going to consider it for research at this time. So that's the reason why they were not brought up, is I don't see them being a viable option in the next 2 to 3 years based off of the conversations that I've had.
Well, I don't see them being a viable option at all. I
Yeah.
mean, my thing is, if you're gonna tranquilize the deer, you gotta touch it because you got to tag it.
Yeah.
If you've got to tag it, you might as well go ahead and
permanent.
So-
spay.
Yeah,
that
make it
animal.
Which is
Make it
100%
permanent.
Sterilize
Make
them.
it done,
effective,
one
yeah.
and done.
You want to sterilize them
Yeah.
that way, but where I was going with that was PZP 22. If you can go off and do it, it's like a one-time dart. You don't have to go off and do it again and again. If we got a research grant to go off and have everything paid for, then the city doesn't pay it. We're
Well,
on the,
even
we're
with
on the hook.
even with
That's the part
PZP,
that I'm
you've got to
looking
do
for.
it 2 or 3
even
times.
with PZP 22,
Because
you're
there's a
still
booster.
But if
you're,
you have a
you're
research
still
grant
going to have to
someone
treat
pay
that
for it,
deer
that's
again.
the thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't- as a city, I
I
don't
know
wanna go
DNR is
off
not gonna write any more research grants. Dr. Ruth's already made that quite clear. He's not writing any more research grants on PZP.
Yeah, and to confirm, you're still going to have to treat that deer again. It won't be as short, but anywhere in a 2 to 6 year window, you'll have to treat that deer again with either one of those methods. So,
And you, to be cost effective, you're going to need to identify the deer that need to be treated once or twice.
correct.
And that's, now you're tranquilizing and tagging.
Yeah.
'Cause
So you're already touching
Otherwise,
Yeah, if you're going
Oh,
to
I'm a big fan of
tranquilize and
sterilization, period, but
inject,
otherwise you're blindfolded.
you might as well
Sterilize.
sterilization
Yeah,
at
sterilization
that point.
is what I really want to do. But if there was a way that we can try and do something else in addition to sterilization, and it was paid
Not
for,
cause the taxpayers, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
with you
I want to
there.
go off and look for other
Yeah.
options. You know,
I think that's the challenge, one, because Dr. Ruth's not going to entertain PZP 22. Spavac may be an option, but then you're having to find a student from Clemson to then do the research on it. And then I still think there's probably going to be some type of funding that would be required from that.
Oh, yeah, well, every grant needs funding.
Yeah.
That's what a grant is. I mean,
Especially,
there's not a lot of deer grant money out there, as Dr. Neocola told us.
well, not only
Cancer?
that, grant money doesn't come
Sterilize
easy
that,
to
right?
the richest city in the state either.
It's
Not
Not as
exactly-
lucrative.
Yeah.
No,
There's another option that you guys don't want to talk about that's free.
What's that?
I said there's another option that might not be very popular, but it's free. Free,
Hunting?
yes. Yeah, so that's something that happens all over our state. And if we could find a way to be comfortable with that, that wouldn't cost us a damn thing.
Yeah.
And that would take care of the problem, just like it does across the state.
Yeah.
Don't look at me like that. I know how you feel about that, Carmen. And I love you for it, but
Well,
There's
right-
another
right
option.
here
I don't
down
think
the-
I don't think we shouldn't not talk about it.
Well, right here down the road at Ann Springs. In Ann Springs, that's what they do.
That's
They
what they
close
do
the park
there,
down
right.
for a couple days and
They hunt?
they hunt.
You know, and maybe it's something that, you know, not to feel like this burden's on just your shoulders, but maybe it's an opportunity to put out another survey to get the temperature of the community, see what they're willing to pay for. You know, if wildlife management, here are the facts, this is how much it's going to cost, how important it is to you
All
as
of
a
a sudden, it's
taxpayer.
not as important when you got to spend
$1 million.
$1 million on a deer. Well, you know what? I can tolerate
A-
a deer.
Absolutely, and I think that's important.
100%.
I think it's important to gauge that temperature because last time we did it, it was just to cull or not to cull. So,
So
do you
I
want to
have-
implement a wildlife management program and not get pickleball courts? You know, I mean, it's an important thing to
I
consider.
typed up
Watch
the
it.
survey, so I'll send you a copy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Carmen, I took that away from you. What were you saying?
Nothing. I said I typed up a survey and I'll send them a copy.
And I just want to get on the record that DNR, Dr. Nicola mentioned another procedure.
Correct.
Tranquilize them, then
And
euthanize them.
Yes.
And DNR won't support it.
Yeah, it's good to get that out.
Which just it blows my mind because the fact that these deer are a nuisance at this point. The same as wild hogs, the same as coyotes, the same as other nuisance
Squirrels,
animals.
raccoons.
Squirrels, and all those, DNR allows unlimited shooting of coyotes or wild hogs anywhere in the state pretty much.
24/7.
And there's no season for it.
There's no season for it.
Yeah.
But
Correct.
deer,
Day or night.
we can't euthanize them? I mean, are you kidding me? It's just, it blows my mind that that's their stance. And I think it's because the deer population historically wasn't a problem because of hunting, right? And they're looked at differently. But in our instance, they're not different. This is no different than the wild hogs in a rural area just destroying crops everywhere. USDA goes out in helicopters and just shoots 1,000 a day.
Nose them down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the unique challenge of
And so,
where
very frustrating
where
to
it's
me
at in
that,
our
yeah,
community
that
is
they-
we have very limited options on what we can actually do.
It's still a
And that's
game
an
animal.
option. It's just DNR's
It is.
put a
Correct.
roadblock up.
They've made it clear that it's a game animal and it's regulated. And in an environment like ours where it's just as much of a nuisance as you described, there should be flexibility.
And just so you know, I'm not against hunting. Just not hunting here.
Just not hunting in my yard, right?
I won't hunt, but
how's
I mean,
everybody
I
think
don't
about
like
this survey?
dislike you if you hunt.
I respect you.
I
do a lot.
Putting out a survey, in my opinion, I think that we were elected to do a job. Let's do the job. That's my 2 cents.
I agree. It's not
Yeah.
popular.
It's not a popular discussion. It's not.
Well, it's not going to be popular no matter what decision we make.
Correct.
The point I brought up after Joey brought it up, what piqued my interest was more of so of the, I don't think a lot of people have an idea of the exorbitant costs that if we implement a wildlife management program, no matter what type of management program that is, if it's culling, if it's sterilization, if it's PCP, if it's Gonacon, you're still hundreds of thousands of dollars a year forever. I mean, 5-10 years minimum. Are people really, do they understand that and are they willing to do that? Or at that point, are
I
they
think
saying,
you have to
know what?
define whether deer is a problem
There's a
or an
significant-
inconvenience.
A significant number of residents in TKK do not have a problem with the deer at all. There's a certain section of TKK, which is pushing back towards the peninsula, Marquesas, Anchorage. They're overrun. There's no culling back there, like the stuff was done on the golf course. The deer that we need to address is in those areas. I don't know what that answer is, but I do think like a survey is something that we need to do to try and get public's temperature and see exactly what's going on, and to let people know exactly how much it's going to cost. But is there anything that we can do now? I'm asking council, I'm asking professionals, that we can do to alleviate having the deer in those yards for those individuals that are like the nuisances in their yard? Is there a device that will scare the deer away? Is
No.
there?
No.
is
There,
there-
there's a list of stuff on the
You could-
website
you could
that
put
I
up-
have
want to
Well,
open
if-
that up and
varying
see if there is
results.
If we
something.
want to
Right.
change the ordinance to where you could do privacy fences, we can put up a 10-foot privacy fence to keep them out. Put some barbed wire around it, cut some razor
Only for
wire.
townhomes.
Brian, I've
You know,
tried it
you can
all.
do that.
Have you?
Councilman
Other
Carter,
than
I,
putting up a fence, I can't do a fence in my whole front yard. I don't have a backyard, it's just water, but,
Right.
yeah, no, there's,
I don't want to say like the city putting up feeding
limited.
stations out there just to, I don't know, just to get the deer
Put
away from that
feeding
kind of
stations
stuff.
up, and that's,
It attracts them. back
well,
over there.
it drives the number of deer that we have up because you're artificially
correct.
Give them
driving
food.
up the food source.
Councilman Carter, you bring up a great point there, talking about the areas that, are challenging because of inability to cull. And I think that's where you get back to whether there's interest from private properties in terms of culling and also sterilization, because if you have that engagement from the community, then maybe they're not on board with culling in that area, in pockets, but maybe they're on board with sterilization, so at least you're controlling the population.
And
in
if we're
those
going to go with
areas.
a hybrid approach,
Yes.
and folks are cool with us sterilizing in their backyard, then okay.
Correct.
Maybe if we did want to do a survey again, we put that kind of information on there and go ahead and do that homework. Say,
would you be willing to have somebody come sit on your back porch and shoot the deer? Or would you be willing to have somebody on your back porch to spay the deer?
Tranquilize the deer, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
You know,
recover the ones that run.
Instead of
They run.
just
Right.
the
I
survey
don't-
we put out, do we do nothing? Do we call? That's, instead of putting that, get it to where, and then track it. Could we track it? Like when folks give us those responses, could we put a tracker on and say, okay, well, these folks right here on
Have them enter their
executive
We
point.
would require their address
Yeah.
to make sure that they're a
So-
resident for
So we would know
feedback.
that.
I think what's important is that over the last couple years, we've learned a lot. And we have a significant amount of information now that we didn't have initially that is now being shared with the public. So I think from Mayor, I respect your viewpoint on elected to do a job. We're doing the job. I think what's important is that with all this new information, I think it's important to get a pulse of what they think now, knowing the significance of this. It used to be
Adds
just,
so
are we
much
going to
more
shoot or not?
than shoot or not.
Now it's a
So
significant
a survey
financial decision.
asking whether you want culling, sterile, that's a flat survey. It doesn't really give you data points, right?
Correct.
But if you're asking, have you had, a deer interaction? Have you had a car deer interaction? Have you had a pet deer interaction? Where are you seeing impacts? Then you start to measure the need for action, right? If you ask the right questions, it gives you the right feedback. And one of the questions was, do we do nothing? Well, if the feedback is that a significant number of people that have not said out loud, yeah, my daughter wrecked her car, the deer ran in front of me. I mean, if we start to see that there's reports of that people are sending back, then that gives us a different direction. If we get a majority of people that say, I'm not willing for you to spend $100,000, much less $350,000, then that's an answer too. And part of what we need to do is understand what those answers look like before we're committing to such
Well,
a
and
big.
It's important too with that, with those questions in, looking at correlations, asking the right questions in the instrument. Are the people who are willing to spend the money the people having the problems with the deer? Are the people that want to call the deer, but they're not willing to spend the money? You can do all that with the right instrument.
And you can do it in sections, right?
Looking at my researchers back there.
Everybody wants to have input, whether you live in the areas that are most affected or you don't. It's still your city. It's still your tax dollars. It's still an opinion.
Absolutely.
So those surveys can go out and like you said, your address would have to be required. I'm sure that there's ways of managing all of that.
I had to, when I did the initial survey for culling or not culling, I just manually went through and had to look at all the addresses to make sure that they were TK.
I think sectioning it off, like having one of the reports I read, actually a lot of them have wards, right? This is Ward A, B, C, and depending on what the effect is for those areas is where you focus the attention that you're doing. Some areas like you won't be able to shoot, but you'll be able to sterilize. So then that's the wards that you focus on, tagging or tranquilizing deer for that. I just think that there's ways of managing this that we don't have enough information on yet. I'm not saying that we do nothing. I personally don't think that's the right answer, but I want to hear from people, right? I want to understand what the effects have been, because it's been 2 years since that survey. Is that right? And it was just a
It was
two-question.
September.
Yeah, it was just a this or
Yeah, it
that
was
survey,
approximately
and now we know so much more.
Well, and
22, so.
Dr.
year-
Dino said nothing until September, right?
What was that?
Doing another survey?
I think it makes sense if we do it. It's got to be an in-depth survey.
I'm with you on us doing the job that people elected us, but I think Carmen and Brian and Tom make a good point that maybe the survey we did was too generic and didn't give us enough information to where we are today. Because like Joey said, we've learned a lot.
Well, so's the public.
Yeah.
But
And I'm
we've-
not
Well,
saying
they
a
asked that question 2
I'm not
years
saying
ago.
a
All right,
referendum.
Well,
kill
and
deer.
no,
one
not
other
at
thing
all.
is,
I'm not
there's
saying that
now
we're gonna
other
take a
options
majority
available.
and make a decision.
100%.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying
Yeah,
that we
that
need to
weren't
understand
available
the effects
when
of
we
it.
did
As a resource, right.
As a resource, as data
So
points.
That's correct, yes. Yeah, I
it-
agree with that.
if it works
That's not
for-
going to be a decision maker. Councilman Miller and I were just saying, like, that doesn't have to be the decision maker. We're going to make the decision.
Absolutely.
But we use- but
It's
we use
just
that as a research
A
point.
tool.
Yes.
It's another tool in the toolbox that y'all can utilize.
Correct.
If it works for everyone, if I can get your survey, what I can do is kind of collaborate and work through a survey to send to y'all for your approval that then gets sent out to the public and set some type of deadline for feedback with that. And
And I'm gonna
obviously not putting it too far out.
we need to ensure that we're doing it with the proper collection tools, not SurveyMonkey. Needs to.
I would probably ideally like to utilize Cognito forms that we utilize for all of our city forms. I'm very familiar with it. I like
Well, the
this.
problem is you can't. That doesn't. Unless
gotta
someone's
be
going to
some
hand
type of
jam all the data they
form,
get into.
The
you know.
positive is you can export it in Excel and be able to create data points through that.
Yeah, I understand that, but you got to make sure when you write these questions, they're coded properly, or the data's not going to go into a proper analyzation tool. I'll get with you offline on that.
Yeah,
that
if there's,
works.
if there's another tool that you're aware of that
Oh, yeah, there's a bunch
that's,
of
Okay.
can get us
That allows us to look at that, get real granularized on the data to understand. So it's not just
Yeah.
these 500 people want to kill the deer. It's like, okay, we got 5,000 that want to kill the deer, but you know what? 4,000 of them aren't willing to pay for it.
Right.
Any
gets you-
feedback and guidance with that,
Absolutely.
I'd welcome as part of that. And I think realistically, for this group, in terms of conversations and where we want to get to, I think sometime entering your May to June council meeting is when I think some direction for staff as to how you want to proceed forward would be ideal, because
Yeah, we're talking budget then.
you're talking budget then, and if sterilization is a part of this, you're going to want Dr. DiNicola in mid-September to get rolling.
Well, I'm thinking we're gonna need to get him in before that. We need him in here to start in September, not just have the. We
Yeah,
don't
not
need
just
him to
have
come
the
here.
That's what I'm saying. He
Yeah,
would
needs to
he
be
would
in here
want to
hitting the
start
ground.
in mid-September.
I
But
agree.
if we need to do that, we need to get the survey out pretty quick.
So a question on the timing of that, though, because if we're talking about Dr. DiNicola coming in for like a hybrid option, is he coming for
He-
sterilization only?
I told him that we were having this meeting this evening, and that through your conversations with you, I would be in touch with him. He is on board with offering a culling and sterilization option under the guidance that he would have the flexibility. Within reason, I understand if you're hesitant about when you shoot, that's a different conversation. But in terms of, he wouldn't operate under the controls that USDA had to work through, because that's not how he operates. So
I
So
wish-
basically,
if
he's gonna
I-
come into our city and tell us how he's gonna run it, huh?
if he
You gonna come in my house and tell me how you gonna do something?
So, to Dr. DiNicola's point, what he wants, and not to take it that way, but he wants it to be successful for you. He doesn't want to come
Right.
in and promise you these things and then come through with 40 deer.
I
For
totally get it.
whatever it's worth, take it or leave it. But through conversations that he had with me, that he said USDA should have known that they were not going to reach the levels that they were under those guidelines. He said they should have known that, for whatever that is worth. So at the end of the day, he wants to help the community, and in order to help that, he needs the flexibility. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't take it any other way than that.
I'd
Yeah, I
be willing
wouldn't-
to give him flexibility, but
Yeah.
the thing is too I can, with flexibility, we're not gonna give him carte blanche. You know, you don't just come in here and mount up a 50 cal in the back of a truck and take off, just shooting wherever you want to.
To
Well, you're
share
an expert, though, in his-
to,
know what-
to
know
share,
what they're
to
gonna do.
share a
But
little
I
bit
mean,
more
just saying.
with Dr. DiNicola, he said he had actually utilized air rifles. instead of the standard guns. He said that the advancements through air rifles and the projectiles that he uses, it still has that same lethal impact without the sound. So he's observed what the USDA has done, and he has thought through how he would overcome some of those things. And I think basically what they were looking for is to have the trust that the safety measures that they have in place are enough to have your support to know that they're enough that they're going to keep our community safe.
That's right.
When I'm talking about flexibility, that's what it comes down to, is that they want to know that the 5 of you have their support to know that they will conduct this professionally and safely, and they will not do anything to endanger our community. But they want to have that flexibility in place in order to be the most successful for our community.
Well, I think that's a conversation we've got to have with our police chief. You know,
Chief-
when they start coming through and wanting to put forth their plans and everything, I mean, we got to run it by him.
We already had that conversation
He
with
was
the
in on that.
USDA. Chief Crosby has the support that he trusts that they are professionals and that they will safely. There's nothing against their safety guidelines. I think it's important to understand that there's a difference between having confidence in them safely executing their plan and then putting on the responsibility of Chief Crosby to guarantee that it will 100%. When you put that burden on the chief, he doesn't. It's just like anything you do. If you are told you have to be the person to do this, you want total control. Mm-hmm. So if you can't offer him total control, then we need to go down this path. And I think that goes back to the original decision that Chief Crosby's on board with either method, but you either have to give him total control or he needs to punt, sit back, and be the support if something does come up. And he's on board with either one of those ideas. But it has to be one of those two.
Just quick question of previous. So DiNicola said he wouldn't want to come till September for whatever he's going to do. But, you know, the budget year ends end of September, and we still have $110,000 we've approximately left that we budgeted. I bring that up, not so much for Joey, but for us.
Right.
In that, you know, we need to keep this discussion rolling, because if there's an opportunity, like you can't shoot deer now.
Correct.
Until September 15th?
Right.
If that's something we wanted to do. But we could start sterilizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could start next month.
He would want to wait until
Yeah, they haven't had their
mid-September.
babies yet.
They
gotta
have
drop
to have the
babies in
babies first. He
May and
said
June.
the ideal time to start is mid-September. So I'm sure from a funding standpoint, you could make it work to where you're being able to utilize those funds this budget year for him to start the process. And I would imagine through further conversations, depending on which route you want to go, is that if you want him to put together a full proposal of culling and sterilization.
Sterilization.
You know what I'm trying to say.
That right there.
Sorry.
Sterilization.
Brain fog. So if you want him to do X amount of deer, then he's going to put together that proposal. And as I mentioned earlier, that his recommendation is obviously to save money is that he's going to just set up shop through the completion of it. It's not, all right, I'm going to come for a week here and then another week in February. He doesn't want to charge us that mobilization fee. So his anticipation is, all right, TKK, you're telling me I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to stay here over the next month and a half to carry it through. So that's what he would envision as part of his project.
So the other thing that we need to talk about too is you know, we're talking about our goals, our objectives, and everything. So what's the number? What's the good number that we get to? I mean, personally, back when we had 500 to 600, we didn't have the brow line that we have now. We didn't
Right.
we didn't have the vegetation that was getting taken out. We didn't have that, and that was 2015.
So I have a suggestion on that number, if I
All
may.
right, what you got?
So Dr. Ruth and other research papers that I've looked at have said that a natural number of deer is typically 25 per square mile. So that puts us just under 100 on the peninsula. That's probably a very unrealistic number for us to expect, right? That we're going to get to that number. Probably 200 is an unrealistic number for us to get to. According to what Dr. DiNicola said and what Noel said, that I heard him say, there's probably no way we're going to get to that number. But to your comment, Chris, I think you're right. When we had 500, people weren't flipping out about the deer.
Right.
It was still 400 more than nature says we should have. But
But
it was a
everybody-
tolerable number for the community,
Well,
right?
and I think that if you have that survey to start with where it tells you what it's not tolerable now, as those numbers come down and you resurvey and you start to get the feedback that, oh my gosh, I can have plants again, then you know that you're getting to the right number. And a lot of what
Yep.
I've read said, don't be so specific about the number, be more specific about the symptoms of that number.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's an important way to look at it.
So, while I think that we need to think about what, statistically is a number, we really need to look at how that number is affecting TGK in general, and specifically the areas that have been the worst affected, that all those red lines, yellow lines, or orange lines. That's where we need to focus on measuring whether we're there yet. Not so much a specific number, although I think that that's a good guideline.
Or might it change over the
deer
years?
I don't think
hard
we-
things,
Yeah.
how many deer are impaling on fences. We didn't have all that story in 2015 with the original. It was starting. That's why the original survey was done. The original count was done, right?
That's right.
It was starting. So if we get to that place and then we are at that manageable place where we're doing maintenance every year, then you talked about a 2-year plan. I don't think that me personally, I don't think that we go into it with a 2-year objective plan. I think we've got to look at this as it's a 5-year plan to probably get to that place where people are happy and we're coexisting well. But then you've got to have another 5-year plan where you're really managing and reassessing every year what those impacts are, to know that number is lasting, and then keep getting back to that number.
Well, that's what
all the
communities are
time.
doing that are successful with this, like, what's the community in Hilton Head, the
Fripp.
gated community? Sea Pines, right. They have a annual management process. Sun City in Bluffton does the same thing. They started out asking for 200 permits a year. Now they're getting 30.
But
And
see, what I'm saying is, we can't put forth a program based on feelings. Well, we feel it's right around 300. We feel it's right around 400. Right now, these 2 years, that's all we got. This is the one shot that we got. That's it. Because the next council that comes in here could be that they don't want to do anything with the deer. So if that happens in the next 2 years, if that happens, then that $500,000, $1 million we're going to spend is all for naught. So if we're going to make
they could do that anyway.
If we're going to make the stab at it, then we just need to.
Regardless of
Yeah, 3
whether
other
we're
people
doing
could
this
come
or
in here and shut that down in the budget and not do
right.
anything. Doesn't matter what we do.
But that's what I'm saying. If we're going to do something, let's do something to make a difference instead of just let's get down to a measurable number. Like that's what I'm saying. That's where I took that with the
we're
5.
not going, in 2 years, we are, I don't think, right? I mean, there's no way that we're going to get to even 40
400
deer.
We could put a huge dent in it in the next 2
And
years.
that's to that point. And speaking with Dr. DiNicola, is if you're willing to pay the price, you can make a significant impact in those 2 years through the culling and the sterilization. That, especially with the attrition rates that we're seeing, you're going to see a pretty quick stabilization and then that downward trend as part of it. And I think that's the important part to understand about the 2 years, is that if you're doing let's say $170,000 plan. Let's say that you're culling 80 deer and you're sterilizing 100 deer. It's going to take you several years until you start seeing those results. And to that point, if you fund it for 2 years and then the next council decides they're not going to do anything, then realistically, those first 2 years that you spend $150,000 were all for naught. Whereas
waste.
you have an opportunity, if you so choose, to make a significant impact over the next 2 years, regardless of future councils. It's just going to come at a significant cost.
Well, and
Well, I
Dina,
think
come.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The cost would be, if we're talking a scenario where the next council after 2 years is going to choose not to invest, and we go all in and I'm just throwing out a number, we've invested $500,000 and we're down to whatever that amount of deer, that amount of money gets us. That next council can come back and say, oh, well, they're done, we're done. And then the deer will come back anyway because
proliferate,
you don't have a program in place. So I think that risk of what the next council will do is going to be there no matter how much you spend
Right.
in those 2 years.
And no matter what plan we
All,
put in
all
place.
you can do is control what you can control.
Right.
Well,
And
I-
right now,
and
you
I
can
understand
control
that.
it within the moment. And realistically, we don't know what the next 2 years even look like from a deer standpoint. If doing nothing or pushing all the chips in, we have assumptions that that's where it's going to lead us, but that's
Thought
where
we were gonna shoot
evaluations.
160 deer. I don't-
I mean, but I'm saying that's where the surveys continue to take place, that maybe you're seeing that significant downward trend to where it is stabilized and immediately dropped off through attrition and sterilization and culling.
I
We
don't have-
just don't know
yeah.
what that's going to look
I don't
like,
have
and
a
it's a
problem with
constant
looking at
evaluation.
being aggressive as a start, because I do think that we need to get the numbers down in order to be able to manage, right? I don't have a thought process against that. I think that we need to be able to have a 5-year, 10-year plan that is got some kind of skeleton. The rest of councils that come after this can choose to add on, to subtract, to change, to redirect. But we have to look at this as we're making a long-term investment. A 2-year investment is not a long-term investment.
Right.
That's a short timer's thought process. And I don't want to approach this with a short timer's thought process.
I think the important thing, and I understand your viewpoint, I think what's going to be important is that the dynamics change. They change every year, and that what may be successful in year 2 or a need in year 2 is not a need in year 6 or year 10.
Well, that's
So-
where the reassessment comes in, right? No
Cor-
one's
correct. I
tied to
think-
a plan.
Yeah, I think the plan is you set forth within if you decide to go down this road, you set what a plan should look like within the next 3 to 5 years, but understanding that you leave
Each
yourself
year
the
you reassess.
flexibility that every survey is going to dictate the next steps. These are the tools that you have to implement the plan, but if the numbers dictate that those tools aren't needed, then you're not necessarily having to carry it through just
Joey,
because.
when you use that word survey, you're referring to counting the deer.
That correct, deer
Okay.
spotlight survey. Sorry.
Right. Just want to make sure
Yes,
that's
it-
clear.
Like I think if council decides some type of wildlife management program, we have to continue those deer spotlight surveys every August. To
What,
keep
the other
pulse.
thing too, that kind of segues us into the surveys and how to conduct those, we've got spotlights, but I would be really interested to see about getting some new technology in here as far as aerial drone.
It's
counts.
$3 an acre to do an aerial.
$3 an acre.
To count deer?
To count deer.
Really?
Yeah.
I looked it up.
$3 an
Actually, I
acre.
got in touch with somebody. Yes.
I'm gonna get in touch with Sheriff Tulsa and see if we can borrow his drone for the night. $3, and that's,
I don't know
man,
if we can count that high.
I got some farmer buddies that got all kinds of drones. See what we can do about getting that down. Who wants to fly a drone?
But it has to be, don't you have to have a special FAA license for
You
that?
do.
Commercial drone license.
Commercial drone license?
And it's night vision. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's all the things, but yeah, that's how much it
Yeah,
was.
thermal imaging, the whole deal, yeah.
Yeah, I've got buddies down south that have all that stuff.
I would say that Carmen is probably on to something here that we need to be thinking long-term, but I think we need to be acting short-term, if I can say that.
Makes
About
sense.
as accurately as I can. I agree with an aggressive upfront approach to get the numbers to a reasonable level, but in a long-term approach, I think we need to keep reassessing, keep doing the survey, keep understanding every year how aggressive or how relaxed we can be with this
Well, we
process.
make a plan based on Dina Cole's numbers.
Yeah,
and
right.
things, and we
I thought he had a
move
great
with that.
suggestion.
I think that's an important aspect of it is understanding that, Ms. Miller and Mr. Carter, how much have you learned about deer since you've been on council? You know,
In a couple months,
And
right?
I think that's where,
More than you want.
regardless of the changes that may or may not happen with the next election, that's part of the process of our standing council members and staff of continuing that education, understanding where we were at, where we came from, what we're building towards. And, you know, at that point, they have the right to decide whether this still makes sense or not. But I think that's an important part of just continuing that education.
A question that I've gotten asked on a number of occasions, right? And maybe something for y'all to discuss is the why. Why are we doing anything, right? And I'm not talking about surveying people as to why do you want us or don't want us to do, but yeah, we with council have made the decision and we did the culling. And now we're having a meeting about potentially culling more, doing sterilization and things like that. I very distinctly remember leading up to the 2015 study. And actually, it was even after Dr. Roos standing in here and telling us that, now granted, the numbers were different, right? Obviously, they were different, but making the statement that, TKK, you don't have a population issue, you have a socialization issue, right? Had DNR officers come in when prior council was talking about what to do about the coyotes, right? And very, very informative, information was shared. But I think one of the questions that perhaps you need to think about or answer for yourselves is the why. Why do you saw the numbers of 6 vehicular accidents and deer collisions with a vehicle in 2023. My recollection for all the people that kept showing up about do something with the deer, it was about their landscaping at their house, right, in their private yard. And I'm not discounting those things, but when you're talking about potentially formulating a plan that could cost us over X number of years, $500,000 plus, having a good understanding of why are we doing this, because we haven't had anybody of any type of authority or scientific background tell us that the herd is sick, right, or the deer are sickly and things like that. Do we have a lot of them? Yes. I think everybody agrees with that. We have a lot of them, but what is the reason for the plan? Yeah, and I think that's, as we develop the plan, I think that's something that we need to include in there is the why, as part of that education piece. Me personally, where I live, there's deer in our neighborhood, right? Are they messing up my yard? No. Are they in my neighbor's yards? Yeah. But they don't bother me. So I personally, not take the city manager hat off. I don't care about the deer, right, or what we do or don't do about them. Me personally, okay, because it's not impacting my home. It's not impacting my family, right? So I think that's something that, again, it's a side piece, but I think it's a piece that at some point we've got to discuss is, yeah, as we're trying to determine what percentage do we want to reduce by, or what number do we want to reduce by, and try to keep it there and things like that, is the question of why. Yeah, why do we feel compelled to move forward with whatever that plan may be?
So we're way past the time we said we would, so I'll make this as quick as I can. So, and I'll share this. Just this week and last week alone, I've probably received about 5 emails a day from people asking us to take action to reduce the herd. It's a significant number of people that are asking us why we're not taking action and sharing stories with us. Like, and I think you guys probably received this email too, but there was someone that talked about their husband that went outside with their dog, and the dog got attacked, and the husband got injured in the process. There's another woman that talked about trying to sell her home and the property value not being as attractive, not having the same curb appeal to sell her home because all the vegetation was destroyed and her property was damaged. Hey, man, I'd love to have my azaleas and my forsythias and my impatiens back, but honestly, and I'll say this publicly, I don't give a crap about the deer. They don't bother me. I've never been attacked by a deer. I've never been threatened by a deer. I don't like the deer poop in my yard because my dogs eat it, and that really ticks me off. But it's a nuisance. It sure as heck is. But it's one I can live with, but it's one a lot of people can't. And that's why we took up the challenge to say, hey, man, I think we need to do something about this.
Well, another why was, Charlie asked a question, Dr. Ruth, when he came and spoke with us, he said TKK has been put on notice since 2015 that we have too many deer. And he said, TKK may not have a deer problem, you have a liability problem. Because you as a city have been told for, at that point, 7 years, we had way too many deer. And at some point, God forbid something happens to somebody because of a deer, we're liable in a court of law. And that's what he was saying. So that's part of the why. It's not the only why. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we have to accept, risks and liability for as a city. But that was one thing he did mention, which kind of, stuck in my mind.
Right. And by no means am I saying that there's not a why.
No, we have to explain it.
I don't know that it's really been discussed a whole lot. Is that collective body, and at some point should be part of that conversation as far as, whether it's coming through the city or coming from y'all behind the dais, as to here's the reason why. Whether it's because of the survey data or the things that were just mentioned, here by Mr. Shirley, Mr. Heislip. I mean, those are all very valid reasons to want to move forward with a management plan, whatever that plan looks like, and things like that. I'm only bringing it up just because I've gotten people that have contacted me, people that I've ran into out and about, and they've asked that question. And because if they just watch the meetings, right, they hear about my flowers, my azaleas, at my house, my yard, and that kind of thing. And I've been questioned. Why are we spending public tax dollars? They have the issue, as an individual. But having more of that conversation as to the why, and having that as part of the narrative for the management plan, I think is going to be very important.
I think that the impact comes with the quantity, the number of deer. If you were just talking about the deer that were here in 2015. People were starting to feel the impact. I think that's when people started to talk about it, and that's why that deer count was done. But it wasn't aggressive enough to warrant action. There weren't so many of them. Well, now that you have deer having babies that everybody's, and that's an exaggeration, but you have so many deer having so many babies in people's yards. Those deer don't know us to be a threat. But yet, if we go anywhere near their fawns, we become a threat.
Correct.
They don't know that there's a 5-year-old that lives in a house that they just had a baby at. And they don't know that 5-year-old's going to see their baby and is going to want to touch. What's happened is that there's been a layer after layer of interaction of that human-deer conflict that is only going to be more prominent as more deer come into the system, right? And that's, to me, that's a big why,
Yep.
because there is that opportunity for those conflicts. Yes, are they, are they nuisance to people because of what they're doing to their plants and the poop in the yard? And, are people now annoyed when they see them rather than excited because they're a rare sight? Yes. I mean, and it's not just a little bit of people. It's a lot of people
Right.
that feel the same way. I mean, that one survey that went out was a 50-50 survey, right? I don't know that it's still 50-50, but it's still a large number. And that's why I say this survey is not a referendum. This is not a tell us what to do survey. This is for us to understand all the data points so that we can kind of weigh in where
100%.
those stress points are. But the why is the quantity, is the number of deer, and how those, in a lesser number, any one of those effects would not be as prominent. But with the quantity that they are compounded.
There's a large number of deer, and the number of deer is absolutely one of the whys. And I really think that's a specific area related issue. So if we do whatever the wildlife management plan that we implement needs to be focused in that area to try and do what we need to do in that area specifically. Because right now, like we said earlier, where we're calling isn't where the issues are, where all that kind of stuff is. It's all the way in the back. So if whatever we do, we need to go off and try and get on private property, reduce that herd, and get those deer under control.
Yeah, well, but they move, right?
They-
I mean, the
not-
deer
not
that
too-
are
too much, but-
no, and that's the other point that Dr. DeNicola made. They don't have huge home areas.
Yeah, just in that area.
But they do move enough. I mean, like the deer that are in my backyard or front yard will end up in the golf course and then do their round and come back again. And they're not there every single month of the year, but they're cyclical. They'll go somewhere else for a few months. So you're seeing sometimes the same deer living in different places.
Because I got a
You
couple groups of deer that live in my backyard, come in, come out, cruise on back, no issue, but there's, like I said, again, there's a certain area of DK that, and they're the ones, they're getting hit really hard, which is where we're getting all the emails and everything like that, where
So
What else we got, Joey?
Done enough
That's
tonight?
it.
All right, everybody good?
the
Tap
survey,
out.
Before we break, do we want to talk about next steps as with regards to this?
Work on the
I
survey.
think,
Feels like the
let's
survey,
Doing the
right?
survey?
Work on getting a survey together.
Okay.
Need to go ahead and get
If
the.
you want to get together and show
Yeah.
me what you have, and then Mr. Highslip, if you could let me know some of the resources for the survey, I can put that on the front burner of being able to get something for y'all to look at next week.
It may behoove us to get, I don't know the schools here between Clemson and South Carolina, but if they have a deer PhD program, you could get a PhD student to help write the instrument.
Clemson does.
Clemson, and then we use the data, but they can use that for their research, and they will be all about it, I'm sure. Just,
Yeah, with the
Okay.
best two,
Like,
right? Yeah.
you know, they can really help us write the questions properly and make sure they're gonna be the right data points we need.
Okay.
It's possible, we don't have to do it, it's just a
I was
suggestion.
going to say if there's some contacts that I could
Yeah, I'll get you some.
Yeah, I think that
I don't know a lot of
the
college
most
students.
scientific,
We can do with that.
unbiased survey
Okay.
that we can have that gives us data points is going to be really well received.
So survey, let's get some counts done.
You got
And
the
then do we have
rules.
to, if we're thinking that it's likely that we would move forward with some action in September, do we have to let Dr. DeNicola know? So he has us on a schedule? Yeah, because, I mean,
If
You hired by somebody?
if everyone is okay with this, I would like to connect with Dr. DeNicola and ask him to put together a quote for culling. And then I will also ask for a more aggressive sterilization quote as well. Just, you already know what 100 looks like, so I will ask him to put a little more of aggressive of a quote together for that. And then from there, I'll have a conversation of, okay, if we're going to launch this in mid-September, when do you need to know by so that you can mobilize? So that we can kind of, I think that kind of sets our timeline to make a decision from that
to
point.
give Joey some direction, could we ask Dr. DeNicola if the solution was to a combination of sterilization and culling of 500 deer?
I think he just needs to put proposals together for us.
But you have
Does
to
he,
give
will
them
he need to
some-
know that or no?
I
Our
think
goal.
I would like that direction.
He,
I
he's-
I
he
would
said
en-
he wouldn't do anything unless we had a plan.
I would anticipate 80 for the culling simply because within
we
the
can get that
timeline he would be there. So I would like a direction on how aggressive you want me to be with the sterilization.
Is that
I'd
okay
say-
with you
I'd say
guys?
minimum 250
Why
minimum.
250?
At least for this first
for
season.
this first season.
Yeah, we're not gonna
what I'm
get
saying.
500 deer this season.
I'm saying, if we sterilize 250, that's
$275,000.
on top of
Yeah, on top of the 80 that you're gonna, that's gonna be 100. So, I mean, we're talking $500,000.
And I'm not advocating for changing the direction of how many more deer we sterilize versus not, but also remember that if the goal is to reduce because of what that impact is, and you're doing a larger sterilization, then you're not addressing the immediate goal at that time.
Correct, but also understand that you have limitations when it comes to culling as well. At most, you may be able to cull 160, and that is making the assumption that you're going to be able to go into the private community. Through conversations I've had, I think getting to 160 strictly through the golf course is probably not attainable.
Yeah.
So that there's
And again,
limitations
like I said,
and restrictions no
I'm not
matter what
saying that
method you
that's-
choose.
That's what I would want to see more of that call. I just want to make sure that we're not randomly choosing the numbers. I want to hear from, I guess, Dr. DeNicola to say this is going to get you to this at the end of the next fawn season, right?
One of the things that he discussed is ideally you try to get to 90% of the does. And the challenge with that is that the survey is a range. It's not an exact
No,
number.
but you just work, you work with percentages of that, right?
Correct. So I can share with you that having a number that's more in the 300 to 400 range of sterilized doe within his time is going to be significantly more impactful than the first 100. He said, when I would enter your community, he said, man, I will be able to sterilize a ton of deer quickly because of how your deer operate. He said, it will just be like this. And then obviously the behavior is going to change. He said the behavior changes a lot quicker with guns than they do with darts, which is fortunate, but the behavior still does change. So, the getting to the last, 100 may be a little more challenging because they're going to be, you've darted so many deer. So it's kind of flexibility within his process that he'll have as he comes through. But you sat here and listened to him talk for 1.5 to 2 hours. He's a very confident man. He is very confident that he can come in and sterilize as many deer as we need him to sterilize.
He also said he bet his career on the fact that we only have 600 deer.
He said he would bet his career that we don't have 1,000 deer, but he believes we have at least 600. That's what he stated.
When would be the best time to do a new count?
August.
August. At their
We're going to have it before then.
Yeah, plus you can see male-female ratio as well.
You're going to have it before
That's
then.
the
if we're
challenge
gonna
with
do
the
it.
drone is you won't get that, but I would agree that in theory that should give you a more accurate count. You just, maybe it's a combination of the both, but obviously that comes with more money.
Back it up to August if you want to. You're going to have it before then.
Well, you won't get accurate.
You won't get the accurate doe buck.
Versus buck, right?
That's right, but you'll get an accurate number.
Of deer, right.
Or as accurate as you get.
Production comes from the does, you want to know that number.
That's right. So, in that, we good with the deer discussion for right now? Okay.
Before the executive session, do we want to look at calendars for the next discussion on this, the next workshop on this?
Nah,
Huh?
we can do that via email.
Okay.
Just to get clear direction from everyone, working on the survey, re-engaging with Dr. DiNicola about when would he need to know by the culling option, and am I considering additional sterilization?
Yeah.
Quote, okay. I'll start.
My recommendation, culling, sterilization, both.
Okay.
3 estimates.
I'll put it together and I'll see if I can tier something with the sterilization.
Just so we have all the numbers. I mean,
Absolutely. And I'll get you a number on when he would need to know by.
And can he give us like expected results from each of those
Projections.
options? Like projected,
I'll ask him to
projected
s-
change?
Absolutely, I can ask him to see if he can give us a little more something there to understand the impact of the levels. Okay.
All right, we're gonna cover council comments. Anybody got any comments?
I'm commented out.
All right.
Nope, nope.
That's good.
City
I
staff has
broke
been
you.
here. It's a brand new workshop. Appreciate you guys being here and helping us out. I know it's time away. It's extra time, extra work, extra time away from your family. So appreciate you guys being here for the council workshop.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're gonna cover executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's do it.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Scott.